What's happening, everybody? Justin, Bridgewater's finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter, fueled as always by the incredible folks at Nerd Tees, and it's in my Montreal Canadiens mug today. Hey, shout out to new Montreal Canadiens captain Nick Suzuki, the 31st captain in Montreal Canadiens history, and welcome to week 15 of my weekly CFL football pick show for the 2022 CFL season. And we're going to get you out of here real quick this week because I just streamed a long NFL Week 2 episode and things are a little chaotic right now, so we're going to get you out of here nice and quick. So last week in week 14, I went 7-5, so back on the happy side of par there at least. Certainly looking for more than that on a routine basis, but you know what? I'll take 7-5. 2-2 straight up and 2-2 against the spread. Did notably go 3-1 on the totals last week, which does actually pull my totals back up above 500 on the season at 28-27, which is good stuff. 37-18 straight up, as well as 34-21 on the season against the spread, has me 99-66, which is exactly 60%. So we're hitting that goal at 60%. I obviously want that number to be higher, but that's what we strive for the remainder of the season. CFL Fantasy, I had a solid week in week 14, bringing in 89.5 points. My MVP, once again, Calgary Stampeders running back Kadeem Carey. 9 carries, but ripped off 118 yards rushing, as well as a major, added 1 catch on 17 yards for 20.5 fantasy points. I had a fairly balanced attack in fantasy last week, sitting with 1,163.6 points now on the season. Still can't quite climb back up into the top 10. I'm still sitting in 11th place in the official Atlantic Schooners CFL Fantasy Football League. The leader now has 1,266.6. So I did actually gain some ground I lost ground. I lost ground to the leader by about 16 points, because last week I was only trailing by 86.7, now trailing by about 103. So we lost ground there. I did gain ground on the team directly in front of me in 10th place by 9.6 points. So now we're less than 10 points behind the team that's right in front of me, continuing to strive, continuing to push to get back into the top 10. In the spirit of that, my week 15 CFL fantasy roster is right in front of your eyes right now, and it is a little limited this week because there are only 3 games on the slate here in week 15. Obviously going very Winnipeg Blue Bomber heavy this week. We're stacking Zach Collaros at quarterback with both Dalton Schoen and Rashid Bailey as my wide receiver 2, as well as my flex play. I think Winnipeg is in for a good week this week. At running back, look, I love Kadeem Carey, and he's been my MVP 2 weeks in a row, but I'm kind of priced out on him right now because he's $9,000 in fantasy. In order to get full value, he's going to have to get 22 to 23 points. So I think I'm just a little priced out on him right now. So I went with a duo of Frankie Hickson and Kevin Brown. Frankie Hickson has taken over for Jamal Morrow very admirably for Saskatchewan, and Kevin Brown has emerged as the running back number 1 for the Edmonton Elks. And I went with Malik Henry as my top wide receiver option this week because I think Calgary's got themselves a tasty matchup as well. That's my fantasy roster for week 15. That takes us into a week 15 slate of games that sees, once again, only 3 games on the slate, which means 3 teams are on bye this week. Basically, the entire East Division is on bye with the exception of the Hamilton Ticats, as Toronto, Ottawa, and Montreal all do not play this week. We got the Edmonton Elks in Saskatchewan to take on the Roughriders. We've got Winnipeg in Hamilton to take on the Ticats, and BC in Calgary to take on the Stamps. New quarterback in BC. Let's start in Sasky now with that Edmonton and Saskatchewan matchup. Both of these teams coming in off of multiple consecutive losses. Edmonton dropping their 3rd straight game last week in a rematch with Calgary. That game was in Edmonton, and they got doubled up 56-28. Definitely not a good sign, and it just seems to be what happens when Edmonton plays games in Edmonton over the last while. Their last 3 home games, they've been outscored 115-69. However, not all is doom and gloom. It was another solid outing for Taylor Cornelius. He completed 72% of his passes, finished for just under 300 yards passing, 2 touchdowns. He did throw a pick, but he did add a touchdown with an 11-yard carry, and he actually signed an extension earlier today through the 2024 season. So Taylor Cornelius will be in Edmonton for at least the next 2 seasons. So I think they just signed their QB1, and he's certainly had performances lately that I think justify that extension. And I mentioned it a little earlier, the reason Kevin Brown is in my fantasy roster, he has emerged as the number 1 running back for this Edmonton Elks team. In his 2 games, he's carried the ball 15 times for $136 on the ground. He's added 66 yards on 10 catches and has caught all 10 of his targets. No drops, no incompletions. You got a guy that can help you move the chains. You got somebody you can build around. Kevin Brown is exactly that for the Edmonton Elks. For the Riders, they dropped their 2nd straight game last week, dropping them under 500 for the season at 6-7, a 54-20 drubbing in the Banjo Bowl in Winnipeg, against the Bombers. And that just seems to be what happens when Saskatchewan plays the Banjo Bowl. The last 3 Banjo Bowls, they're being outscored 122-39. That's just Winnipeg's game. Cody Fajardo did only have 3 incomplete passes in that game, but only put up 124 yards passing. He did have a rushing touchdown, and it looks like he is able to run the ball again with consistency, which is good news if you're Saskatchewan. But Cody Fajardo and Mason Fine are both listed as questionable for this game, so it's entirely possible we could see some more Jake Dolegala like we saw at the tail end of the game last week. And just don't ask me what I think of a Riders team that took 13 penalties for 141 penalty yards and turned the ball over 4 times in what is a marquee football game for them. Look, like it or not, the Banjo Bowl is one of the marquee games on their schedule every single year, and to have them just kind of roll over and play dead, it's definitely not a good sign. The Edmonton Elks do play their best football away from home. That much is very clear. All 3 of their wins have come on the road, and there's very little right now about this Riders team that I like, to be perfectly honest. I don't love how the quarterbacks are playing. I think it's been a little bit better since they've gotten Kyron Moore back, and the receiving core is getting a little healthier. Duke Williams is also questionable in this game, though. It's also a reflection of, playing the Bombers in back-to-back weeks. You know what, folks? Give me the dog. Give me the dog. Give me the upset in this one. I'm going to take the Edmonton Elks on the road in Saskatchewan to upset the Saskatchewan Roughriders, no matter who's playing quarterback for them. Edmonton goes into Saskatchewan, pulls the upset of the weekend, and upsets the Riders. So against the spread, Sasky's laying 7.5 here as a home favorite. I think you got to go with Edmonton plus 7.5, no matter which way. I like them because I like them to win the game outright. But to me, this is a hedge either way because the Elks are 5-2 against the spread on the road this year. So they're playing much better on the road than they are at home. They've been the beneficiary of some very, very high spreads, and they've covered with a good consistency. So give me the 7.5 points on Edmonton. Total in the game set at 50.5 points. I think I'm going to lean over on this one. Let's just dip barely over on this total. It's really tough either way, but in the CFL, it going over this number is not as difficult as it can be in the NFL. So we're going to go ahead and go over 50.5 points in Edmonton, Saskatchewan. Give me Elks 28, Riders 24. Edmonton comes up with the upset win. Now, since there are only 3 games on the CFL schedule, I'm going to take this opportunity right now to shout out my great friends and sponsors at NerdTees. And ladies and gentlemen, nerdtees.ca, as always, is the place you need to go to find dozens and dozens of incredible loose leaf tea blends and accessories like what I'm drinking today. It is a lovely cup of my absolute favorite watermelon oolong. I just had it on my stream yesterday morning, and boy, doesn't it just help the throat feel better, and it just helps you be able to talk through this all this wonderful football content. So nerdtees.ca is where you need to go, and you want to use my promo code, which is BWFinest. That is going to save you 15% at checkout. You're going to get free shipping in Canada on any order over $100, which if you're shopping for Christmas won't take you any time at all with all the good stuff you can find at nerdtees.ca. If you're an American viewer, great conversion rate on the US dollar. nerdtease.ca, BW Finest, save you 15%, get your free shipping, find yourself something to love, or find someone you love something to love. You can do it on nerdtease.ca. On to Hamilton now, where the Ticats are going to play host to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Winnipeg now winners of 3 consecutive games after losing the only game they've lost this year, kicking up that big 54-20 win against the Riders in the Banjo Bowl. Another virtuoso Banjo Bowl performance for Zach Collaros and the Bombers. Collaros in particular had a monster day, completed almost 85% of his passes, 273 yards passing, 4 passing touchdowns. Now, he did cede a rush touchdown to Dakota Prukop, but still, the guy put 4 on the board. He had a big game, and I think he's solidifying his most outstanding player campaign. It's tough for me to look at who else might be in that conversation, but I'm going to leave that up to you. Let me know in the comment section below who you think is in the most outstanding player race as it sits right now, in addition to Zach Collaros. Do you have Kadeem Carey there? I think I probably do. And really, just no matter where it is on the football field, offense, defense, special teams, lines of scrimmage, it doesn't matter, coaching, it doesn't seem to matter where it is. The Bombers are just a cut above nearly everybody else, especially where it really matters. High disciplined football team. They win the line of scrimmage. They win time of possession. They're just better. We go over to the Hamilton side of things now, 3-9 on the season, losers of 3 straight games. They are coming into this game off of their bye, so they should be well rested, a little healthier, hopefully have Dane Evans back at quarterback. But 2 weeks ago, look, the game 2 weeks ago where they lost 28-8 against Toronto in Hamilton, I'm sorry, that was just the game that broke my back. I've been finding excuses and finding reasons to back the Hamilton Ticats all season long, because I firmly believe that there's a better football team than has been shown in this season sitting there with the Hamilton Ticats. And whether it's the inconsistency at quarterback, whether it's the inconsistency in coaching, again, we have to have the Orlando Steinhauer conversation, and that needs to be an ongoing conversation. No matter what it is, this team's just snake bitten. So that, unfortunately, was the kind of game that broke my back in terms of backing Hamilton. And even if Dane Evans returns at 100%, what's his supporting cast, right? The supporting cast is Tim White. Tim White's been great this year. Stephen Dunbar's been pretty good as well. But that's the supporting cast. Sean Thomas Erlington, they don't involve him enough in the game on enough of a consistent basis. Don Jackson started the season good, hasn't really kept that up. They've got good rushing quarterbacks behind Dane Evans, but the problem is their rushing quarterbacks can't really play quarterback. So if you can't do that, that's a problem in this league. And the defense is not winning games. The defense is good enough to win games, but right now they're not winning games. That's a problem. Look, they're definitely trying. But in my eyes, the play calling is deteriorating. The penalties are starting to add up. And now they find themselves 2 games back in the East Division of Montreal with just 6 to play. The season is really on the edge of a knife, which means it's the worst possible time to be playing the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. I mean, are we serious here? Like, it's not late enough in the season for Winnipeg to just go, games don't really matter anymore, and just punt stuff away. I know they've clinched a playoff spot, but they got 2 other 8-win teams in the West Division. So they really can't afford to take their foot off the gas yet. They're getting close, but not yet. And if they did, they really have to be worried about what it could mean down the line. So I think the Bombers roll in this football game. Let's take Winnipeg on the road in Hamilton to get a big win over the Ticats. Now, on the line, the Ticats are taking 8.5 points here as a home dog, which is a really, really, really tempting number to take, but I am going to lay the points on the Winnipeg Blue Bombers here. It's a big number, but the Bombers have covered 5 of 7 numbers away from home this year. That includes some relatively big ones, and I just don't think right now that the Hamilton Ticats are the kind of team that's going to cover this number. So let's lay the 8.5 on Winnipeg. Total in the game set at 46.5 points. This is a tough one for me, but I'm going to go under on it specifically because I just think the Bombers' defense dominates this football game, generates multiple turnovers off of Dane Evans or whoever happens to be the quarterback for Hamilton, which, we'll have that conversation in the offseason. I got a name for you that I think is going to be the Hamilton Ticats quarterback next year, but we'll have that conversation. We're going to stick on the under here, under 46.5 points in Winnipeg. Hamilton, let's go Bombers 30, Ticats 10. I'm going to give them 10 points against the best team in the league. I think that's doing them a favor. And the last game we're going to look at this week sees the BC Lions on the road in Calgary taking on the Stampeders. A pretty pivotal matchup in the West Division, even though neither one of these teams look the way that they kind of thought they were going to look at the beginning of the season. BC 8-3 now on the season, losers of 2 straight games, really struggling obviously since the Nathan Rourke injury. They're also coming into this one on the tail end of back-to-back road games, dropping a 31-10 decision in Montreal last week to the Alouettes. Antonio Pipkin gets the start, and Antonio Pipkin things happen. He completes 54% of his passes for a $174 through the air, no passing touchdowns, did throw an interception, added a rushing touchdown, 31 yards on 7 carries, and was their leading rusher because, of course, as we know, James Butler is in witness protection. James Butler's last 4 games, he's carried the ball 38 times, which less than 10 carries a game. Let's have that conversation. Only turned those 38 carries into 98 scoreless yards on the ground. His last touchdown came in week 4. If you're looking for as big a reason, look, I know Nathan Rourke being hurt is the reason that the Lions are struggling right now, but just as big a reason as anything else is the fact that they've got no run game to speak of whatsoever. Like I mentioned off the top, the BC Lions are officially turning to Vernon Adams at quarterback this week, which is an upgrade for that entire receiving core. Dominique Grimes, Lucky Whitehead, Brian Burnham, Keon Hatcher. It's an upgrade for all of them. Javon Catoy. It's an upgrade for the entire receiving core, but this is a very tough spot against what I think is a much better pass defense than the statistics show. I think teams are a little scared or a little more scared to run on Calgary, even though Calgary's run defense, I think, is even kind of pedestrian. But the fact that the Stamps are statistically the worst secondary in the CFL makes no sense to me because that defense is much better than that. It'll be really interesting to see what Vernon Adams is going to look like. For Calgary, who are now 8-4 on the year, winners of 2 straight, doubling up Edmonton in their rematch last week, 56-28. That game was in Edmonton. And look, if you remember from 2 weeks ago, I said they had an absolutely dominant third quarter and rode that to the win against Edmonton. Well, now the third quarter was just the whole game last week. Jake Mayer was hardly challenged in the secondary in that game, completed 77% of his passes for 287 yards passing, but did only find the end zone 1 time through the air. Shout out to Tommy Stevens, their running backup quarterback. 4 rushing touchdowns for Tommy Stevens in that game for Calgary against Edmonton. A massive performance for Tommy. The Stamps did allow 400 total yards on defense, but so much of that game was in garbage time. It was a 2-possession game at halftime. They outscored them 20-8 in the fourth quarter. So much of that game was just kind of garbage time defensively, 60%, guys. We got this one wrapped up. So much of that was just kind of, whatever time. I'm not really going to hold the 400 yards against Calgary's defense too much. Certainly counts in the stats, but I'm just not going to hold it too much against them. Like I said, the Lions will absolutely improve with Vernon Adams under center, and the Stamps have been beatable this year, both in Calgary and against the West Division. They're only 3-2 at home, and they're only 4-4 against the West Division. But, I'm going to grab Calgary to pick up the win here. I said in previous games, I think BC's just legitimately the better team. I said that last week between BC and Montreal. They lost by 3 scores. Now, granted, it wasn't Vernon Adams in there at quarterback, but Calgary, to me, looks like the better team between these two. So we're going to take Calgary at home to pick up the win. But against the spread, I'm actually going to hedge my bets here, and I'm going to grab the BC Lions. Calgary's laying 5.5 points at home, and this is a team that has not covered against the spread this season. They're 0-5 at home, so no against the spread covers at home this year. I'm going to tell you to take the 5.5 points with the BC Lions. They could win this game outright. It's entirely possible. I think Vernon Adams can cover this number, so we're going to grab BC plus the 5.5 points. The total in the game set at 52.5. This is a really good number, I think, but I've got to see Vernon Adams in this offense first before I make any grand sweeping commitments about it. And I do think the Lions defense is talented. So we're going to grab the under here, under 52.5 points in Calgary, BC. Let's go Calgary 26, BC 23. That's what we'll go with in this game. 26-23. Take the Lions with the points. Game stays under. There you have it, folks. There's my abbreviated picks for Week 15 in the CFL. We'll go over them here with you one more time. I've got the Edmonton Elks going to Saskatchewan and upsetting the Riders 28-24. Take the plus 7.5 points with Edmonton one way or the other in this one in a game that goes over 50.5. I got the Winnipeg Blue Bombers with a big 30-10 victory against Hamilton. That game is in Hamilton. So lay the 8.5 points on Winnipeg in a game that stays under 46.5. And I got the Calgary Stampeders beating the BC Lions 26-23. Take the plus 5.5 with BC in a game that stays under 52.5 points. That's it for me, Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter, fueled as always by the incredible folks at Nerd Tees. Once again, shout out Nick Suzuki, new captain of the Montreal Canadiens. I'm very, very excited about that. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch and listen to all the content I'm now putting out on a weekly basis. It's a lot of football talk, but I know you love it. I certainly do too. Enjoy Week 15 in the CFL. We'll see you again for Week 16, and we're starting to wind down this season, folks. Playoffs going to be here before you know it.